What's up, guys? This is Commander Jaime here. Back at it again with Aqua Force. And was it yesterday? Yep, yesterday I actually topped at ARG State Championship in Chicago at the shop called Card Fighters on the Ground. So I figured I'd show off my deck profile and explain why I did some of the choices and the ratios of my cards. And so why Aqua Force? The thing I picked Aqua Force for is because they recently got support, and I figured it might be the right meta call. In a sense that basically I was worried about Gear Chronicles though, like the Chrono Jolt build, and of course since Gears are still around, there is the Grade 1 7 Seas Rush deck. So really thinking about it, I felt like to compete with Gears, I felt like I needed a better early game with multi-attacks, so they don't have as many cards to, go off for their first drive, Metallica Phoenix, and so on. Because that's really where they, start picking your hand downsize, and so if you could beat them to it, you pretty much just win. So that was the idea. Early aggro, essentially. And with the Grade 1 7 Seas Rush, the same concept, like if you have a Generation Break deck against that, there's probably going to be a good chance that you're going to lose that. So I figured an early deck that doesn't need GB to be active to fight back is the top choice, and luckily with the Blue Wave units, most of them, actually all of them, don't require Generation Break, and so I figured if I built my deck gears toward that, and like my Grade 2 lineup, it would be a strong contender against it, and also still play Tetra-drive, so for the limit breaking ability to actually go off against the Grade 1 7 Seas. So that was my idea in going into the meta. So the Forerunner, I still running Bubble Edge. Bubble Edge is there to help you in the early game. You drop down like titles and Fuegos early on, and you need a way to recuperate your hand for defensive purposes and to dig deeper for your combo pieces for the next turn, and keep up your tempo and have your early multi-attack strategy keep going, so that way your opponent's hand diminishes and there will be at high damage. So once you start back to striding, it's basically continuous battle, and you should win by first or second stride. It's happened before where I G-guarded, and then my first side would be Tetra-boil, and then you would just lose. That kind of mentality. So Bubble Edge is there to help you recuperate the hand to keep going in the game, so early aggro doesn't punish you. And Aqua Force doesn't have a way to call units from the deck, or somehow basically what you have on the hand and what you have in the field is what you do, is what you have. And Bubble Edge isn't Generation Break restricted, so you can do it early on. And the best feeling is when you have double title on rear guards, and you get instant double draw, and leaving 2 titles on board for the opponent to deal with next turn. So that's why I stick with Bubble Edge. He's pretty good. So for the Grade 3s, I picked 4 Angers and 3 Tetra-drives. Anger Boil's there because he's like your main guy you want to be on, so that way when you stride Tetra-boil, you get the main benefits out of it. Restand 2 units and give them +3. Makes it a lot easier to do those turns without putting as much cards to commit. And then his Generation Break 2 skill is there like as a mini Lambros in a sense, and you can actually abuse it later on with units like Tidal and Fuegos, where you just give them the plus 10k and go nuts with that. And then also with Tetra-drive is there because Grade 1 7 Siege is there, so I was hesitant to play the other guy that's on stride and has an effect, but honestly he doesn't seem that worth it, so that's that. So 7 Grade 3s. I play 6 crit and 6 draw, and then with Bubble Edge, so that way I wouldn't get grade stuck, and so I was able to jump down the number of Grade 3s to 7 basically. And then Grade 2s, let's see, show all these guys off. So 4 titles, of course. You want the early aggro, he's free. 4th battle enabler, what else can you ask for? He's there also with a Bubble Edge play to get hand size back, even better. Early game or late game as well, so he's always good. Fuegos is his brother from another mother, essentially. And what's really nice is that it threw a lot of people off that he wasn't generation break. So they sometimes will like let him live and realize it too late on my turn. Like, wait, this guy can go off, or he can still go off, or something like that. So all he needs is a counter blast and be the wave third, and he'll be your other attacker. And so to make it even more consistent, I decided to run the other grade 2s as blue wave units. That's very important. So both Damian and Lucianos have the blue wave name, and ideally you want to write them first, and then you drop on title of Fuegos, and then go off from there. You get like your 4 or 5 attacks pretty easily. And why 3 Damia and 1 Lucianos? Damia is really good. She's useful in the Tetra-boil turns, basically making your front row hit numbers. She becomes an 11k, your Vanguard becomes a 31k, and Fuegos becomes a 16k, after like the Anger Boil skill or some other +3 gain and so on. There's many ways to get +3 to all these units, but sometimes they needed the +2 to actually make that 5k in total to hit numbers. So now that Demi has that ability for just the cost of a Soul Blast, that's really handy. And now when your first Tetra-boil attacks, they can't just drop like a 25k G Guardian and be like 2 pass. Now it has become a 1 pass, which now they either take it all or they have to guard even more. So that's more cards out of the hand, or they just take it to the face kind of thing. So Demi is really good. She also has more plays you can do outside of that, and I'll probably make a combo video to show off what stuff she can do as well. And then Luciano's there. I used to play the 4 Magnum, High Tide, and Adelaide before. Adelaide served as the purpose of the Lane Joker matchup, where you didn't have a front row anymore, and so you use Commander Tabas to make it like 16k attacker, and then attack from the back row twice, so you would attack Commander, give all the triggers to Adelaide to make it a much bigger threat, and 2 against the Lane Joker. So Luciano's also fits that role, so I thought it was perfect, and then it also has the blue wave name. There were a few times I actually got it off where you special counter blast, and then he's restand there on the second wave only. Of course, it contradicts with Anger Boil, but I find him useful outside of that, and that's why I also play him at 1, so I don't see him as often, and if I do see him, I usually ride him anyway, so that way he doesn't contradict the deck too much. And because of this, my grade 2 lineup is technically non-GB restricted, with the sort of minor exception with Namia and Luciano's being restricted to grade 3 blue wave, but still, if they're making you go first, they're going to regret once you attacking title and Fuegos on grade 2, especially if they have a 6k Vanguard. Fuegos hits 11k, so even if they got it triggered, that's still going through. And then once you ride to grade 3, you'll be the first one to go. You can still go off with Damia and Lucianos, essentially. So those are options, and people have complained where Lucianos needs a special counter blast, but I mean, you run enough blue wave, so in the early game, I guess you could say it's almost like a 50-50 of getting that. If not, don't worry about it. I mean, you could always just ride them and then use Fuegos anyway, so it wasn't too much of a big deal, is what I'm getting at. So to the grade 1s, I played the PG that unflips Play-Doh. You need the unflip in this deck more, because you're consistently using 1 to 2 counter blasts per turn. It's not horrible, but having the flip is nice, especially when you have like certain decks that can try to kill you when you're at damage 3 or damage 4 and you don't want to like take it, so you use the PG, and so you at least get the unflip out of it. And I tend to ride this guy first as my grade 1 run, I ride, and the reason is that once you get to grade 2, you usually use a Seagull Soldier or Damia once you get to grade 3, and then you can Soul Blast it, and so when you actually perfect guard, you unflip for free, essentially. And also, since I ran like multiple draws than the usual amount, I didn't feel the need I had the perfect guard to protect my rear guards, essentially. So I was fine with that, basically. And then of course, 3 stride fodder. Again, I wanted to stride, and then I noticed people have played 4, but I had to make room for certain grade 1s, and I'll explain why. But I don't have trouble striding, thanks to like Bubble Edge, the draw triggers, things like that in an early game, and then of course your mulligan. So that seems to work out fine for me. Hopefully others would think so too. There is Seagull Soldier, as I mentioned. He's really good. Soul Blast 1 when on place. Give a unit plus 3k. It's relevant because it makes title hit numbers as like a 12k attacker the first time, and then when he's boosted by him or another 7k, he makes 14k, which is relevant in grade 2 Vanguard. And then the same thing he does, plus 3 to Fuevos. Fuevos hits 14, which also hits numbers. And then of course you can use it not early on, late game too, when you're doing your Tetra-boil turns. His Generation Break 1 skill actually comes in handy where he can bounce himself, and if you don't want to discard another card, you could always bounce him and discard him, so that way all the other cards that you have are still in your hand for your next turn. Examples are like PGs, titles, Fuevos, all that good stuff. I mean, you can live without a Seagull Soldier, especially if you already got the use out of him once or twice. So he's really good early game and late game, and he's probably like the ideal booster you want to have most of the time. So that's why I play him at 3, to see him early enough most of the time, and late game as well. And for my other great ones, 2 Stacia and 2 Orphea. Stacia is there for a back row attacker. She's also another battle enabler technically because she can attack from the back row. But neat trick is that you can put her behind Fuevos on a column, and you didn't have to really call another thing on the other column because of Tetra-boil being on Anger Boil. You restand the whole column, and since it gets power, it actually becomes a 12k attacker from the back row after that. So that way when you attack Vanguard, you still have a rear guard standing, whether it's Fuego still or Stacia, and then you put any triggers, drove check on the second time that Vanguard is attacking. So those triggers aren't to waste because most of the time they PG the second attack anyway. So it's a good way to use her that way too. Also in the Link Joker matchup, if you have an open rear in the back, she's there to help increase the number of battles as well, especially if you have Fuevos. So you could drop her in the back row and then have Commander Favas and then have Fuevos and then just make Fuevos a 16k. And then there you go, you do Stacia, Commander, and then Fuevos can go off with as a restander 16k base at that point. And then Orphea is there for the control matchup mainly. I know people rather have that for a different grade 1, either up the count for Stride Fodder or Seagull Soldier or whatever, Stacia, all that good stuff. But I still wanted to keep her because she has resist, and she's really good against control matchups like Kagero, Narukami, Link Joker, Megan Colony, and so on. And so, neat things you can do is basically you can call her to the front row, and Link Joker can't really lock her because she has resist. You just gotta make sure that there's nothing behind her if they get big crunch. So be wary of that. Outside of that, I picked her over Millennia because in the matchup that is not control, you can't really use Millennia unless you're on Thavas, on the Thavas stride technically, and a lot of, I guess you can say 95% of the time, you're gonna go into Tetra-boil because the deck is just geared around it. So then Millennia will be like vanilla at that point and only have resist. So I picked Orphea because she can be actually useful. Her skill basically makes a title out of anything. You can get extra attacks that can hit potentially after triggers or boosted by Anger Boil's GB2 skill, or you can push the number of battles of a certain unit just to get an extra draw from Bubble Edge's skill. So that way it becomes, in a way, Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, draw card. So you can do things like that. So that's why I play those. Now for the triggers, for heal, need them. Pick that art, that's what it is. And then I picked that blade 6 crit. 4 of the Brutal Trooper, of course, and 2 of the Supersonic Sailor. Brutal Trooper is really helpful in the sense that you can keep shuffling back and you don't minus yourself, you draw a card, and if you're restanding, you +1. So you make the opponent rethink their strategy. If do I really want to take this Vanguard attack because you just, saw me shuffle back a crit or 2 usually. And it's a good way to, in a sense, up your crit count because I'm playing 6 crit. It's almost like I'm playing more crit that way. So that way, the 6 draw, 6 crit ratio isn't as detrimental as you think, And also you could do as a booster early on, and then once you feel like you need to get the extra draw, you could just use his skill. So he could be a booster and then disappear, and then you get another card back later on. So things like that, to help your units hit early on for the early aggro. Supersonic Sailor is there because sometimes you want it to either two things, fill up soul or unflip or both, that kind of thing. Petrol is really, again, he only goes off if you're on the top of stride, which if you're not facing the control matchup, that's not going to happen in Outlaw at all. And so Supersonic Sailor seemed the most impactful overall. And he has came up. I've used them twice in the ARG yesterday. So either I wanted a perfect guard, but I couldn't get the unflip because I didn't have one in the drop. So I wanted to make sure I live. And the guy double critted, and I'm glad I PG'd. And then next turn I just used them to give me another Column Blast, and I was able to do a Tetra-boil turn with basically Fuegos. So good stuff, very handy. Now for the 6th draw, for Malika, and then for two of the other draw, your preference. Malika's there, into soul +3 unit. She's useful with Aqua Force because it actually needs that kind of extra boost to hit numbers sometimes, whether it's to be more aggro early on or actually hit an 11k Vanguard later on, such as Tidal Assault, swinging for 12k, or any other grade 2, that kind of thing. And then also, it fills up soul because Damia now is a unit that uses soul as well, alongside with Seiko Soldier. So yeah. The other guy is just filler. You could play any other draw. 5k, you could just drop it as a 5k booster. So it's actually kind of relevant, like when you have Fuevos swinging 11k, or a grade 3 that's inherently an 11k already. So that's the main deck. The G Zone for Tetra-boil. Tetra-boil is the main guy you're gonna go into. The deck is just inherently promotes this turn. You can do it. You could G guard and then stride into them, and you already have Generation Break 2 at that point, so you could restand. And then also, if you don't do that, he's also a first stride option over Commander Tabas if you don't really need the Persona flip in the G Zone. So he can inherently add another attack because of Anger Boil skill, So there's that option. And he's just good, a restander and Aqua Force that breaks even. What more can I say? For Commander Thalas, he's there for the control matchup, like I said. Or he's just useful too, in case for some reason your hand's wonky, you can just first stride him and you automatically have Generation Break 2, just striding him basically. And he also sets up well for Wailing Davos because one of his skills is GB3, so that way when your next turn is stride, you don't have to rely on a G Guardian to get you GB3 essentially. So he helps also for the control matchup for Wailing to be set up correctly as well. So it's synergized as well, basically. And and if you're facing Link Joker, you can attack from the back row still. There's options. That way your cards aren't dead basically, because they can't attack, 2 Lambros. Honestly, I didn't go to him all day yesterday. There wasn't any benefit sometimes. There's certain times where you don't have Fuevos or something, or don't have enough Counter Blast for the full Tetra-boil turn. So Lambros is there for that reason, but changing grade 2s, it's made it a lot harder to do Lambros effectively, where I used to have double Magnum and a High Tide, so those inherently kind of help do the Lambros turn. Not to mention with High Tide actually apply some pressure because it gets 10k on its own. But now that those units are gone, Lambros seems kind of lackluster, unfortunately. So one of the things I'm going to try out is actually taking these 2 Lambros out completely and then try putting the Blue Wave guy. That way you can fix your heart on those other matchups where you miss your heart. And then probably a second Wailing. I actually felt like I wanted a second Wailing against Vanquisher. So basically that's my strategy from that point on. See how those units play over Lambros and see if that's what's going to be my final change after this. And then these are the other 2 units that I have for striding, Wailing Tavas and Aristotle. Aristotle's there because you can first stride him and kill anything you want directly, such as Laurel if you really need to get it off the board. or other units you can think of. The other is Wayland. Wayland again, Generation Break 3, kill as many as you had battle with 3 guards already. So in a sense, if you had title attack twice, and then maybe another card attack, that's 3 battles, and then when Wayland attacks, you can kill 3 units, essentially. Of course, your opponent chooses, but the idea is depending on how many units they have, that's how many battles you do before Wayland. That way you could just nuke their board anyway. And then his other skill is wave 3 or more. Counterblast 1, he gets plus 5k for every battle that happened, and your opponent cannot guard with grade 1s from hand. So he's really good in the sense of like you need to finish your opponent off, and you know that they're gonna interrupt your turn with those nasty G guards that like kill your shit or bounce your shit or whatever. So then you just poke with like maybe a title or some other unit and try to build up basically to the 3rd or the 4th wave, and then Wailing can just attack as the final attack and actually be a big number, and at that point they have to think about if they're gonna guard this massive attack or they're just gonna take it, and then if they're at 4 damage, there's a risk that you drive check a crit trigger and just put them out of the game, essentially. I actually did that once at the ARG and got me the game, so really useful. And it's nasty how you can return the favor of nuking another person's board. So G guards are basically Flotilla, Ice Barrier Dragon, Dismal, and Screw You. Aqua Force has kind of G guards, but Flotilla is basically the 20k shield. Ice Dragon is the 25k shield, and then Dismal's there to protect your rear guards from like me, you know, if they try to attack it or something. And you feel like I kind of need this guy, so you can use that for that reason. And Screw You is there if you just need a guaranteed 25k shield, because he's wave restricted from wave 1 and then 4 or more, which is weird. So wave 3 on your opponent's turn, these are useless. So either use them as useless, or then Screw You if you needed the 25k shield guaranteed. So, and that's why I play those. So they seem to work, at least with their ratio. So no complaints here. And so that was the deck profile. Matchups. So it was 5 rounds Swiss, and then after that was cut to top 8. So the first round I faced was Asha, yeah. And basically I actually went off early aggro. I think I had like Fuevos, and then he had a G assist, so that made it even worse for him. And then I kept the pressure at grade 3. I think I had another like card, like title for example, and then basically the next turn he could even stride after right into grade 3, and he what's funny is that I was at 3 damage and he did Vanguard, and I ended up PG, and I was just like, I don't have the unflip to make a full Tetra-boil turn, but I basically, no, I didn't even PG. I G-guarded. That's what I did. G-guarded. So since I G-guarded, I would have Tetra-boil online, and then I made sure it was a no pass, and then he's like double crit, and I was like, oh my god, thank god I did that. And so the following turn, I actually used Supersonic Sailor to give me an extra unflip, and I got the 2 Counterblast fulfillment for using Tetra-boil, and then I got a Foibles, and I was just, that was it, you know. He had lost so much card advantage, not to mention from G assisting, so it was guaranteed. And then game 2, it went actually a little longer. I got the early aggro, so he lost some cards early on. Took some damage too as well. I think he was a 3 or 4, and then finally he actually got to stride, and I took some of the hits, and then it went back to me, and I was just like, I G-guarded one of them so I could do first strike Tetra-boil full power, and that was it, essentially. So that was pretty good for me. Round 2, I faced Spike Brothers. It took me a while to figure out what he was playing. At first I thought he was playing Dudley because he had that one Dudley grade 2. I think if it hits Vanguard or Rearguard, you can like counterblast and call something from hand, and basically you can get another attack that way. But then he rolled a grade 3 and it was Bad Hand Dragger, and so I was like, oh, he's playing that. And basically I gave him early aggro, so he had to lose some cards early on, which is bad for Spike Brothers already. and then I just live his stride turn with his good end to break right into bad end kind of thing. And then after that, I just had multiple attacks because he literally only had like 2 cards left because he was using all these skills to call from hand to try to finish me off, but it wasn't enough. And so I won that game. Game 2, he had a wonky hand where he chose not to ride, and I guess he had the wrong grade 3. And then I took advantage of that, and I just kept attacking with, early game and the title Fuegos. And by the next turn, he was able to ride and stride, but it didn't do anything because he didn't have that many units, so he only got like 3 attacks in total, and I just was like 1 or 2 damaged. So I was easy to just take the Vanguard, and then if I really wanted to, I could guard the other ones. I couldn't remember. But point is, he didn't have enough resources. I came back next turn using Tetra-boil and just finishing it off. Round 3 was Dimension Police, D-Robo specifically. Now that's scary. Game 1, I was also applying the early aggro, and it was scary because he was able to actually break ride because he lived in Legion, and he had double Laurel. So I was like, that sucks. And so I think he got his Vanguard up to like 39k or something, and then I was gonna die if it hit, and so I was really thinking about it, and my hand size was kind of like not enough to guard this power because he couldn't break my shields 2 at a time, which is damn, so I made it a no pass if he got triggers, but if he got it a grade 3, then I'm dead. I was counting on him not to drive check the grade 3, and he did not, or die bazooka, and so it didn't pass. I was like, oh, thank God. And then the following turn, I just Tetra-boil him, essentially. And the game 2, early rushed. I was putting up the pressure, and I was using Brutal Trooper to give me advantage. So with the Tetra-boil turns, I was getting like, I think a +2 because I had 2 of them. So I have this massive hand, and then of course, since I run 6 draws, I'm actually hitting like my draw triggers during the drive check and stuff. And still applying all this pressure because I'm giving all the power to like units like Fuegos and Tidal and so on. So I think what ended up happening is that basically he tried to do, what's his name? Leon, there you go, the stride, and I was like at 2 damage, I'm like, no guard, and then he doesn't get any triggers, and I'm like, well, it looks like I'm gonna kill you next turn, and since I plus so many cards, I just had the perfect board to do another Tetra-boil turn and just finish him off, essentially. So yeah, that was that. Round 4, faced Great Nature. Interesting. That game I opened up double title. And I got like, the draws from Bubble Edge, and he lost card advantage, and for some reason he was not great stuck, but he wrote a grade 3, but he couldn't stride, and he tried to like still kill my titles and stuff, and at that point it didn't really matter, and I just like strode and kind of like killed him, so he couldn't even stride after the mini attacks, and then I guess he just didn't have the other grade 3, or I think he used the stride fodder to guard as well, so that hurt as well. It was funny. I don't always open double title, but when I do, I call them. So he was making fun of me. And I was like, that sounds funny. Sounds like the Dos Equis guy. And then game 2, it wasn't double title, but it was Fuegos and title, and he was able to stride, but at that point it didn't really matter because I did early aggro, and I just took the damage, and then I did a Tetra-boil turn, and I think he lived that turn, but he didn't have enough to come back and then try to attack with the grade 3, Vanguard, and I just like guard that, and next turn I just did another Tetra-boil turn. That kind of thing. This early aggro is really, winning me games, essentially. And I'm glad it was working out. That's the main focus of the deck, and it's still, working throughout these rounds. Round 5 was a different story, though. I was facing, his name is Kevin Cho. You probably heard or seen his name all over the place. BWCs and ARGs and all that. So he's a really good player. He's been to Worlds, and so this is my first time actually playing him. So I'm kind of a little nervous, but it is what it is, And unfortunately, he's playing Gears, and I did not open early aggro both games. So essentially, it was basically the first game trying to survive and then not give him counterblasts and, you know, to see if I could break through and, you know, maybe I can sneak in a Wailing Salas, but it wasn't enough. He was able to basically use the stand trigger that gives 10k to the Vanguard. He had 2 of them on board to make his Chrono Jet 31 base, and then he was able to G-guard and have actually guarded the Wailing Salas, and I was like, so much for that, and that's how I lost after that. Just, you know, it's not a good game when you don't have your early aggro and then you're like fighting off gears when they're still going off once on first stride. So game 2 was basically the same thing, but I think he next staged me, and I was just like, I need to take the next stage hit because I don't have anything, and then he crits me out of the game at that point, and I was like, well, that's it. So that was like, I guess, the only round that my deck kind of like not had the early pressure, which, you know, was important for that matchup too, because that's what I wanted for. So, oh well. I went 4-1 in Swiss, so I got the top 8. I got second in Swiss. Kevin Cho got first since he beat me, and then we went to top 8. And in top 8, I faced Vanquisher right off the back. And the first game, I didn't have any early aggro, but I was still pushing him damage. And I did a Wailing Davos turn when he was at 4 damage, and I poked probably 3 times. And then with Wailing, I got big enough that he's like, I can't guard this, and I got a crit and got him out of the game. So I got game 1 that way. And then game 2, I had some early aggro, and I thought I was going to win that game until he frost strode, and then he attacked and drove check, double heal, and he went from 5 damage to 3. And now he has those 2 heals, and he nuked my board essentially to the bind zone. And his G-guard is basically live. So it wasn't, I probably lasted another turn 2 or 3, and then I lost because I couldn't really do anything because of the G-guards, you know, killing my stuff, which was kind of hard, you know, especially, you know, putting so much commitment early on to try to finish him off, and, you know, it would have worked, but he healed twice in that one drive check, so that got him the game. Hard to really come back after doing that. And game 3, we went into time. It was 0-1-2-3, and he put me to 3. He was a 2, and I tried to do 4 attacks. I couldn't really stride, or it wasn't as effective. I can't remember, but point is, I was still on grade 3. I was on Tetra-drive, and he didn't give me the damage to 4. And so I was just like, damn, that could have been nice to have another actual attack too. But oh well, it is what it is. And he was able to guard everything because he had double heal apparently, and G guarded twice. And I was just like, well, that's it, folks. And so I lost out of top 8 right then. And that matchup is pretty hard. I'm not gonna lie. And I haven't faced Norakami in a long time with Aqua actually. So that's that. And so what we got was like the mat. We got like a pin, and then of course we got the invite right here. And they apparently misspelled the your. It's not the right your. And so the other thing that was neat is that the store, it was in Chicago. It was called Card Fighters on the Ground. They did like raffles, and I actually won something. So this is like basically a trade binder of Descendant and Alfred. So that was cool. So yeah, pretty proud. You know, Mighty Aqua Force. It's my second time topping with them, and specifically Blue Wave as well. So I will say that, you know, the way I picked Blue Wave over Foul was because, you know, the early game is much more important in those matchups that I mentioned earlier, and Davos could not keep up with those, and so that's really what it came down to. I'm not saying that Blue Wave is stronger than Davos. It was just, I felt like this was the meta call for me. Both Davos and Blue Wave are strong, and each have their pros and cons, and I play both the decks, so, and I do enjoy the decks, and I think they're strong decks too as well. It's just that they have their pros and cons, so, and that's why, you know, I play Blue Wave over Favos. So yeah, guys, hope you enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, share. See you guys out. Bye.